Well, I am stoked to be back with you guys for week 2 here. You're stuck with me for one more week after today, unfortunately. And I know some of you are probably looking at me going, he has a hole in his jeans. There's a story behind that. That hole came from playing a game at Day with Dad with one of the awesome kids that got to come hang out with their dad at the prison. And I will gladly wear these anywhere I go so I could tell that story because he beat me at Jenga after 35 minutes of an intense game of actual us circling the table trying to figure out our next move. So don't get mad at me for wearing something that has a hole in my jeans. It has a good story behind it. So, but like I said, I'm awesome. I'm glad to be here. And like I said last week, I told you a little bit about this series and how it came from those commercials on TV where they're trying to tell these people how not to become like their parents. And you see the weird things they do, and you see how Dr. Rick tries to help them prevent that. And it pretty much sums up how you and I tend to end up repeating some of those same mannerisms, looks, tones, phrases that we heard or saw our parents say. Now, let's see if any of you have said any of these generational parental statements. And dads, I am talking to you here, and I hope this works. We're going to try some technology here. Hopefully it works. We'll try the side button. All right, let's go back to the back. Quick one. When your kid takes too long in the bathroom, have you ever said, "Do you fall in?" Have you ever gone and said, when your neighbor's washing the car, "Hey, can you get mine next?" This is difficult. When you fall asleep in the recliner and have you ever just said, "I was resting my eyes"? When you see a friend in public, would you ever say, "Well, I guess they'll let anybody in here"? When you're carrying something a little too heavy, have you ever just said, "It's not heavy, it's just awkward"? When a kid leaves the front door open, you ever yell at them and say, "I'm not paying to heat the neighborhood"? Have you ever said people, and when you're driving in town, have you ever just said people do not know how to drive in this town? If you ever drive with me, you just get used to it, okay? When the kids are being rowdy in the car on vacation, have you ever said, "Don't make me pull the car over"? I mean, come on. Guys, it's not really a sport, but let's just say what it is. You're racing the time on the GPS. Don't lie. If it says 7:15, you're pulling in at 7. It's a game we play. If you're lying, then you don't really drive, all right? And the famous last words, have you ever tied something on the back of your truck and when you got done, you just kind of shake your hands and be like, "I ain't going nowhere"? Everybody sees it in about 2 weeks at my house when I get the boat ready to go. We all have a tendency to repeat what we've heard or what's been formed in us along the way. And as I've been saying, it's just not from our parents or family of origin, but it's also our culture, our media, our teachers, professors, coaches, friend groups, or church. They shape us as well. We learn a lot from different sources along the way. And we absorb a lot of good and healthy things along the way, as well as some not so good things along the way. And in this series, we are attempting to unlearn some of those less than stellar things that we have learned along the way. And one of the key prayers that we have used is we've taken a couple verses from Psalm 139 and 25, and we have smashed them together. And it goes, "Search me, O God, show me your ways, teach me your paths, guide me in your truth." Say that with me. Search me, O God, show me your ways, teach me your paths, guide me in your truths. Now I want to start, all right? This is not about assigning blame. This is not about playing the victim card. We may not have had any control over somebody else's action towards us, but we do have control over whether we repeat the same cycle or not. This is about you and me owning our story so it doesn't own us. Today I want to talk about addictive behaviors and what the Bible calls strongholds. And they tend to get passed along through generations. And I know that many of you here are already cycle breakers in this regard, okay? You've identified and you've worked past them. But perhaps some of us find ourselves still struggling with the very same thing that a parent did, or that maybe their parents did, or maybe that their parents did. And it has been well documented, just some examples here. It's been well documented that children of alcoholics have 4 times the risk of becoming an alcoholic when they become adults. Boys who witness domestic violence in their house are 3 times more likely to become physical abusers. They grow up assuming that anger and violence is how you will handle something. Then they tend to follow that same cycle. And all kinds of addictive behavior gets passed along, and some of the research does point to a genetic predisposition. But most of it points to our environment and the way that you and I process things along the way. So like last week, we talked about patterns, trauma, and scripts. And to acknowledge those unhealthy patterns that we honestly catch ourselves repeating, we might say, well, man, I just sounded like my dad right there when I yelled at my kid on the field. You know, that's something I swore I would never do. Or you might say that I got so nervous about something, it's bad that because I thought it was about to happen, the same way my mom always saw the worst case scenario playing out. Or it seems like I always turn to something to numb my pain, but that's just what my family has done throughout the years. I mean, what patterns do you see yourself repeating? And then being honest about any major or minor trauma that might have left some scars and damage that you maybe have not really dealt with. A lot of addictive behavior is the result of unresolved hurt. And I believe that Satan, the one that Jesus calls the father of lies, I believe that he wants us to get to react to trauma by getting us to either dwell on it or deny it. Dwell or deny. And he really loves to get us swinging back and forth. Dwell, deny. Dwell, deny. And you might imagine that has a real impact on your sanity. God's way is never to dwell or deny. It is to deal with it, to open up to him, a friend, a trusted counselor, and to let that poison out and to expose those wounds to his healing touch, to allow him to enable us to move beyond the trauma and to grow from it. And then there's those scripts, those roles that even subconsciously we were handed that we believe that we must play that part in the family movie. And we all know that there's not a real family movie going on, okay? But these are things that we feel we must do. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he told me this story about, and it fit right into this script. He told me as a teenager in his house, he lived in a house of a raging alcoholic dad, and he always saw his role as a protector. He told me that one Thanksgiving, his dad got so drunk he started abusing his mom, and my friend, as a teenager, picked up the toaster oven and knocked his dad out. Happy Thanksgiving! But that's what he saw his role as. It was a protector. Maybe you played that role of protector, or your role was peacemaker, or early on you had to become the man of the house, or you had to play second mom, or maybe you saw yourself as the glue that held things together, or maybe growing up you were expected to be that all-star, the beauty queen pageant winner, or the scholar. I'm just telling you, identifying these scripts and those traumas and these patterns go a long way to breaking the cycles of addictive behaviors in your life. Now, before we go any farther, I want to ask a question. What is it that keeps you from walking free? What do you do? Not your parents or your grandparents. Your brothers, your sisters, your friends. What do you really struggle with? I'm going to spitball here a little bit, okay? I don't know. Maybe it's anxiety, worry, panic. Maybe you have some anger issues. Maybe you have some unresolved bitterness rolling around in there. Maybe you are in the grips of gambling, alcohol, drugs, pornography, or some other kind of sexual addiction. Maybe it's bigotry or cynicism. Maybe it's criticism or perfectionism or procrastination or codependency. You have some relationship wounds that left you with trust issues, or maybe you're a control freak. Are you a workaholic? Are you an obsessive fitness junkie? Do you overspend, overeat, undereat? Do you struggle with anorexia, bulimia, body image? Are you a slave to the mirror or to the scale? Do you know something is wrong, but you do it anyways? Do you ever say that I need to change my language, but you still go out and spew out profanity? Are you addicted to hurry? Do you often find it hard to go to sleep at night, but you find it hard to get out of bed in the morning? Do you struggle with depression? Do you battle envy or insecurities? Do you have a memory that haunts you? Do you have any unresolved guilt that paralyzes you? If you answer yes to any of those, welcome to Hill Church, where we are in recovery from something, every one of us. Everybody should know that. We are not perfect. Most of us are like the rest of us. We all struggle. And the cool thing is that most of us here have found the hope. There's a bunch of us here who are trusting the power of the unfailing love of a God for every step of freedom we take every day. And the Holy Spirit of God is transforming us from the inside out, as many of us are working towards becoming cycle breakers. Still, that being said, you need to know, this is a community of strugglers. There's not a perfect person in this building right now. We are all in this together, and you guys, if you're struggling, let it be known you are not alone. You also need to know that there is healing, there is freedom, and there is new life waiting for every single person. And you really can become a cycle breaker. Jesus came to set us free, and if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Now, in the next few minutes, I'm going to dive into the Old Testament of the Bible. I'm going to jump back into a book, 2 Kings. We'll be in chapter 5. And the principal characters in this story are a guy named Elijah, who lives in Israel. He's a prophet. He's a chosen spokesman for God. And there's this other guy who is a general in the army, in the enemy army, the nation of Aram. His name is Naaman. And I'm going to just kind of describe Naaman here a little bit. Naaman, dude was a stud. He's a tough guy. He's a highly respected military guy. He was even described in the pages as a mighty warrior. And this dude, he is a man's man, middle linebacker kind of guy. And I'll be honest, if I was going to have an example that you could see, I would tell Bennett to come stand up here right now. That's who Naaman was, man. He was a stud, all right? Naaman was tough. But this mighty warrior gets hit with an unexpected diagnosis of leprosy. Now, back in those days, leprosy was, and it still is, a disease, and it has drastic effects. It starts in your skin, and it continues to go deeper until everything in your body is affected. And when you got it back then, it was a social, relational, and emotional death sentence. There was no vaccine, there's no shot, there's no known treatment or cure. It was terrifying. So I'm going to jump into how this story begins. In 2 Kings 5, verses 2 and 3, it says, "At this time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, 'I wish my master would go see the prophet in Samaria. He could heal him of his leprosy.'" Now, I think this is really cool that this girl cares enough about Naaman to tell him this. And obviously, she's not hung up on being taken captive. She wasn't bitter. She didn't see Naaman as the enemy. She simply saw him as another human being that needed some help, hope, and she knew exactly where he could find it. I was just thinking, when I was reading this, when I was working on this and studying it, how personally grateful I am that I have some people in my life that care about me that will always point me to where I could find help. I mean, I hope you have those type of people, and I hope that you are grateful that you have people like that in your life. These people who care for you, they will tell you what you really ought. You really need to go to a meeting. You really need to go check out Hill Church. You need to check out the small groups. Maybe you should go talk to somebody, or you need to talk to a counselor. Maybe you're going to need to see a doctor. You might want to read this book or check out this podcast. I think it could really help you. Those type of people you have in your life, I hope you're grateful for them because they truly care about you. Now, Naaman, he would be grateful to this girl who points him to the one and only true God who could heal him of this incurable disease. And so Naaman, he goes to the king that he works for, and he says to him, we have this girl who works in our house, and she's from Israel. And she told me that there's this prophet over there, and he could heal me. And so with your permission, I would like to go give it a shot. Now the king grants his wish. And the king said, "Hey, I'm going to send a letter out and make sure you get the very best treatment possible because I want nothing to hinder you from meeting this prophet." And what it says in 2 Kings 5 and 6, and he says, "Go and visit the prophet." The king of Aram told him, "I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel. Naaman starts out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, with this person I present to you, Naaman, I want you to heal him of his leprosy. And when word gets out to Elijah that this mighty warrior is coming, Elijah looks at this as an opportunity to put the floodlight onto God, not anybody else. In verses 9 and 10 it says, so Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elijah's house. But Elijah sent a messenger out to him with this message, go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and you will be healed of this leprosy. And, well, I'll just put it, Naaman is ticked. He is not a happy camper. Now, you got to remember, Naaman is kind of a big deal where he comes from. He commands people to do what he tells them. Plus, he has in his hand a letter from his king saying, you are to help this man. This is a guy who is not used to having to wait. He is thinking, I can't believe this. I have come all this way, and this guy sends out a messenger to see me? Who does he think he is? I have come all this way, and he won't come out and personally meet me face to face. He sends out a servant to come out here and tell me, go skinny dipping in this river? What? I could have done that back home. We have awesome rivers back home. Much more impressive rivers than any they have in this place. This is ridiculous. Man, he turns and he storms off. Now, in Israel, the Jordan River really wasn't just another river. It has a special place in history. Now, when the nation of Israel escaped captivity in Egypt, the Jordan River was where they crossed over into the Promised Land. Now, and it's been seen as a significant reminder of freedom and new beginnings for the Jewish people. It's also eventually where John the Baptist would baptize thousands of people and eventually baptize Jesus. Now, of course, this is happening long before John the Baptist and Jesus show up on the scene. Naaman doesn't know anything about the history of Israel, but he was right about one thing. There's nothing magical about this river at all. It really wasn't any better than any river he had back home. There's no bubbling waters. There's no hot springs. There's no special kind of mud pack you could buy at the Jordan River gift shop that you could put on your skin. Even though the Jordan was a landmark that represented freedom to the Jewish people, it's still just a river. Sort of just like the place where many of you may have been baptized. It's just an ocean, a backyard pool, the lake, a hot tub. There's nothing magical about the water. But there's something very, very magical about the healing grace of God that meets you there in your humility and obedience. And a bunch of us have found that healing and wholeness and brand new life, not through the water, but through our faith in Jesus. So Naaman, back to Naaman. Naaman's still ticked, okay? Naaman hasn't got over this, okay? He's confused. He's disappointed. He's desperate. He's mumbling under his breath. He's walking around kicking rocks and blowing off steam saying, no, Jenny, this is not a story about me. I have that tendency sometimes. But his men who are with him courageously step in and they kind of settle him down. In 2 Kings 5:13, it says, but his officers tried to reason with him and said, sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him and go do simply what he says. Go and wash and be healed. Don't you just love people like that? They speak into your anger. They help you clear your head, help you gain a perspective. I mean, good friends, people you trust who will say, dude, I know you're mad. I know this didn't go the way you thought it would, but honestly, what he's asking you to do is not that hard. You ought to go give it a shot. I mean, who knows? This might work. Honestly, I think it's really cool the respect that Naaman's guys have for him. I think it says something about his character, about his leadership. First of all, his servant girl cares deeply about him. His king, who he worked for, stepped up for him. And now the guys who work under his command, they obviously love him and they want him to be healed. So eventually Naaman says, you're right. I mean, we have come all this way. If that is what he says to do, I should go and do it. And in 14 it says, so Naaman went down to the Jordan River and he dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Now, Elijah told him to go dip into the Jordan 7 times. And as we read in the Bible, 7 is the number that is used for completion. And as I am learning in what it takes to break these cycles in our lives, is that healing, how healing occurs in it, is you have to humble yourselves. You have to follow through. You have to keep dipping. You have to keep on dying to yourself. You have to keep surrendering to God's power and grace. You have to keep praying. You have to keep saying, search me, oh God. Keep showing up to church for your groups, for recovery meetings. Keep working steps and integrating them into your life. You see, this whole walking dependent on God is not a one-time go under the water type of thing. It is a dip in the Jordan 7 times type of lifestyle of surrender that involves some perseverance. And in verse 15, Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God, and they stood before him. And Naaman said, Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept this gift from your servant. Naaman is extremely grateful for what has just happened. And he is saying, there's no one like your God. He alone healed me. You know that I live in a polytheistic culture back home of many gods, but I now know there is only one God, as what Naaman is telling him here. And he is the true and living God. And he says to Elijah, I know I can never repay you for what you have done, but I have brought you 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and I bought you 10 sets of clothing. It's all yours. Elijah won't take any of it. And he won't take credit either. Elijah pretty much tells him, I didn't do anything. I didn't wave my hand over you. I didn't smack you on the forehead. I didn't even come out to meet you face to face. All because I wanted you to know it's the power of the living God. The power of the living God met you in your obedience and humility. And even though you reluctantly went down to the river, you still did. And eventually you humbled yourself and you got in that river, not just once, but 7 times. And God met you there in your faith. And he wants you to know his grace is absolutely free. And he just loves you, Naaman. And he wants you to be healed. Naaman vows his allegiance to the one and only true and living God. He leaves full of gratitude and he leaves full of freedom. But most importantly, he leaves in touch with his Creator, the lover of his soul. And to me, this is a cool story. I haven't read this in a long time. And as I read it, I thought that there are so many people's lives, this cycle of addictive behavior just continues for generations, all because they wouldn't do what Naaman did. They won't humble themselves and go seek help. I know this is not profound, okay? But if nothing changes, nothing changes. If we are not willing to let go of victim mentality, if we keep saying, if you only knew all the things I have been through, or we say that that's just the way I was raised, or that's all I know, my whole family deals with life this way, if we are not willing to ditch the excuses, nothing changes. If we are not yet willing to own our story and own our stuff, nothing changes. If we are not yet willing to surrender to what God is asking us to do, nothing changes. If we're not yet willing to follow through and dip in the Jordan 7 times, nothing changes. If we continue to say, I got this, this is not a problem, this is not an issue, this isn't a stronghold, I'm not addicted, I am good, nothing changes. And I've seen so many people who are living in denial saying, my drinking isn't a problem, it's just a little pot, it's a little meth, it isn't an addiction. I don't have anger issues. I don't have forgiveness issues. My fears are not irrational. Porn is not unhealthy for me. My spending is not out of control. My relationships are not dysfunctional. And besides, I can fix this on my own. Really? I used to think that until I heard something that changed that. If you could have, you would have. But you can't, so you won't. Now listen to me. Naaman was a mighty warrior, a tough guy. He could not heal himself, and we can't either. I love how another guy, a tough guy, puts it, Paul. He says in 2 Corinthians 1:9, we felt we were doomed to die and saw how powerless we were to help ourselves, but that was good. For then we put everything into the hands of God, who alone could save us, for he can even raise the dead. I have been learning that there is power in powerlessness. When you and I humble ourselves, we admit weakness. And when we sincerely pray, search me, O God, show me your ways, teach me your paths, guide me in your truth, then God's strength, his power, has permission to flow through us and help us walk free. Breaking cycles takes a power greater than yourself. And you need to know that there is only one thing stronger in the entire universe. It's stronger than the power of God. And you want to know what that is? It's his desire to help you. His desire to love you, heal you, lead you out of that dysfunctional lifestyle. Bill Wilson, one of the founders of AA, noted his and others' miraculous relief from alcoholism. He once wrote that we found that God could and would if he were sought. Now, if that is true, as millions of recovering adults can attest to, then isn't it possible that God can't and won't if he is not? You see, I feel that God gives us a choice through this double-edged choice of free will. God our Father lovingly asks, do you want to break this cycle? Do you want to walk free? Do you want to get well, or do you want to keep on doing the same old thing? The surrender of our will to the will and supernatural power of God, that's where the pathway of freedom begins. It wasn't the water of the Jordan River that saved Naaman. It was his surrender to do whatever God was asking him to do. And I'm learning that there are just some things God won't just do for you, okay? He will transform us because he alone has that power, but he desperately wants to, but he also wants our humble, intentional, and dependent cooperation. Now listen to me. God won't be honest about your junk for you. He won't go to rehab or meetings for you. He won't go to counseling for you. He won't do the work for you. He won't renew your mind for you. He won't take your meds for you, and he won't show up every week and worship for you. And the one thing I had to learn, he won't let go of bitterness or amends for you. He won't think on things that are true and noble and right and pure and lovely and excellent for you. He won't let the words of Jesus dwell in you richly for you. He won't cast out all your anxiety on him for you. He won't change your friends group for you. He won't serve the least of these for you. He won't forgive other people as you have been forgiven for you. He won't practice gratitude for you. He won't practice generosity for you. He won't humble yourself for you. He won't resolve to be a cycle breaker for you. Those are things that you and I, as we humbly and constantly do those things and make them part of our regular dip in the Jordan 7 times rhythm of our life, he continues to do the amazing inside-out transformation, and the cycle stops with us. You know, in week 1, last week I talked about these redwood trees, right? Big, huge, tall redwood trees, 300 feet in the air. They're huge, all right? That's the ones that they can actually drive a car through back in the day. We talked about how they extend their roots out like hundreds of feet from each other. The roots all intertwined together with other trees, and that's how they hold each other up. So they can soar high, they can grow strong. And the truth is, guys, when you're in with everybody here at Hill Church, when you're involved in the small groups, involved in the life of the church, that's what happens here. Everybody's roots intertwine together, and that's how we hold each other up. There are so many good people who are willing to intertwine their roots with you, people who are willing to listen, share, understand, and humbly learning and unlearning together. I want to give you a word from God from Isaiah 57. It says, I have seen what they do, but I will heal them anyways. I will lead them. I will comfort those who mourn, bringing words of praise to their lips. May they have abundant peace both near and far, says the Lord who heals them. He wants to bring healing. He wants to bring freedom in your life. And you know what? God can and He will, if He is sought. I'm going to ask Bennett to come up. We're going to close a little differently today. I saw him walk up here, but I don't know where he went. He's right there. Guys, I got one more week with you guys on this, and I hope you all come back next week, okay? Like I said, I'm super excited about this because this series actually changed my life, and I'll talk more about that next week. But I want you guys to know God can and will if He is sought. I just want to pray, and then Bennett's going to close us out with a little worship. Father, God, we are so grateful for the freedom that you bring to our lives. We are so grateful for the hope, the new beginnings. Grateful for your grace, grateful for your relentless pursuit of us. We're grateful for giving us free will so that we can choose to love you, so we can choose to get well, choose to walk free, and ask you for your help. Father, I thank you for this wonderful community of all the fellow strugglers in this place. God, I just know that there's somebody here struggling with something that somebody else has struggled with. And I thank you for that, and I thank you that we can intertwine our stories and our roots with each other and help each other grow and change and become cycle breakers. Father, I just thank you for this time that we've had together. And Lord, as we just close out and worship to you, I just want people to know that if we seek you, you will meet us there in our humility and our obedience. In your name we pray. Amen.